Good evening and welcome to Economic Sense. I'm Rebecca Cressman and we're live in the KBYU studios with Utah experts to take your calls and answer your questions about how your family can prevent and overcome financial difficulties. Nearly everyone in Utah has been affected by our strained economy. The name of our show, Economic Sense, is what all desire to have, especially in these troubled times. Tonight, specialists in managing money and relationships, personal finances and credit and debt are manning our phone bank. If you have questions about money and relationships or managing your personal finances, or if you'd like to share a successful experience concerning finances, we welcome your call at 1-800-298-5298. We'd like to thank the financial specialists from AAA Fair Credit Foundation, United Way of Utah County, BYU, and USU Extension Services for being here this evening. I'll also be talking to experts in all of these areas throughout the night and taking some of your calls live on the air. Tonight, we'll focus on three issues faced by all families. First, relationships and how our finances affect the ones we love. Second, we'll talk about budgeting and its role in stabilizing our financial futures. And third, we'll end our program with a discussion on credit and debt. Links to reliable resources about these topics are available online at kbyutv.org/economicsense. To begin, let's take a look at a short video that answers a common question. How do I cope with feelings, family, and finances?
It's ridiculous. Do not walk away from me. I'm talking to you.
It's no secret that money management and finances in marriage are a leading cause of family strife, and if left unchecked, can lead to divorce. Whether you have a great deal of money or very little, financial stress somehow finds its way into the mix. Perhaps this is because economic troubles are usually behavior problems and not money problems. Sometimes in relationships, the way money is used or withheld can express feelings of anger, guilt, manipulation, or power. Dr. Bernard Poduska, professor of family life, has identified a few common examples of how to cool friction over finances in a relationship.
Dad, Mom bought the most beautiful
Problem.
outfits.
Oh, really?
Your spouse rebels and goes on a shopping spree because you control the money too much.
You don't have enough clothes right now.
Honey, they were on sale.
Solution. Allocate a portion of the family income to each spouse to spend without being accountable to anyone.
And your allowance for the month.
So I get to use this any way I want.
Any way you want.
Problem. You assume your spouse paid the utility bill when he or she expected you to do it.
I forgot.
Solution. Sit down with your spouse and outline your duties, such as bill payment, budget maintenance, grocery and clothes shopping, and so on.
I'll take care of that budget.
Mom! Oh my God! We can watch stars and football!
Problem. You spend the family's tax return on a fancy new gadget, even though your spouse indicated he or she wanted to invest the money.
It was on sale.
TV.
Solution. Discuss the needs and wants of all family members before making impulsive purchases.
And minimize the things we want, we would have more money to do fun things.
Problem. You belittle your spouse's hobbies or interests and resent spending money on them.
And how much were those green fees again?
Solution. Consider your spouse's feelings when you spend money or discuss finances. Look for ways you can both pursue your interests within the family budget.
There.
That's it. And look at this one. I can't believe, look at that amount.
That is not mine.
Not only can spending behavior affect the marriage relationship, children learn the importance or unimportance of money from their parents. They notice if moms and dads engage in good financial planning and constructive conversations, or if they complain and argue about money. An adult's attitude about money and how finances work can affect, for good or bad, the next generation. So, can your feelings actually help you manage your finances? According to Dr. Poduska, they can. Money spent on things you don't value usually leads to a feeling of frustration and futility. Money spent on things you value usually leads to a feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment.
You know, We might even be able to take the family vacation we've been waiting for.
That would be great.
Couples need to communicate, look closely at their purchases, and find common ground to make sure money is being spent in accordance with agreed-on priorities.
See if we can do it.
But the most important thing is that we're working together and we're making decisions together.
Right.
If you need help controlling your feelings, your finances, or both, call 211 Information and Referral. Operators will direct you to nonprofit services that specialize in helping families and individuals manage their money and their relationships. You can also visit kbyutv.org/economic sense, where you will find links to government and community services ready to answer your questions. Your feelings about money in a relationship are often similar to your feelings about people in a relationship. The way you choose to use your limited resources says a lot about your priorities and values. Look closely at what feelings you're expressing with your money and consider how you can learn to convey them in a more constructive and positive manner. With just a phone call or a mouse click, you can receive help with your finances and feelings because it's okay to ask.
Well, we have with us now in studio Dr. Craig Israelson. He's an associate professor in the School of Family Life at Brigham Young University. Dr. Israelson teaches a family finance course and is recognized as one of the experts in this field. He writes a monthly piece for a New York-based financial planning magazine. If you have a question for Dr. Israelson or the experts that are mounting our phone bank right now, you can just call 1-800-298-5298. We've got to say thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Israelson. And I'll call you Craig because I know we're going to be talking a lot about things that are quite personal in our lives. And interestingly enough, when we're watching that story, the video story, I took out something which was financial problems occur and that kind of friction between couples, whether or not you're rich or poor, it doesn't really matter the financial status of your family. It's kind of endemic in all relationships.
Well, we're people in the end, and money is just a magnifier of who we are. So if we have inclinations to be controlling, money magnifies that. If we have inclinations to be charitable and sharing, money magnifies that. So our raw humanity comes out and is magnified by the use of financial resources.
Oh, it's such a great symbol because you do think about that. You think about when you're a kid or whatever and you got that magnifier out and everything looked bigger. So money in itself is not maybe the issue or the challenge for the couple. It's how we view money, and then that just, I guess, is brought out.
Yeah, financial problems are usually not strictly money problems. They're behavior irregularities. And the greatest irregularity is a self-focus or selfishness, because that even little kids recognize when there's selfishness, and that is just a repellent socially.
Well, okay, and you say selfishness, and I find that interesting because we've been told by leaders over the years that one of the most important keys to a happy marriage or happy relationship is learning to be selfless and not selfish. So that kind of selfish tendency starts to really magnify or is revealed when we start talking about money issues. So yeah. As you talk with people, and I know as you teach in the School of Family Life about that issue, how do we check whether or not we're guilty of being selfish without even realizing it?
If you get a ticket suddenly to a ball game, who do you think of taking? Your buddy or your spouse? That isn't necessarily a selfishness issue, but where do our first thoughts go? If we earn a little extra income, is our first thought to get something we want, or is it to get a special item for a child or for a spouse? Mm-hmm. Where do our first thoughts go?
Okay, so if our first thoughts are going to ourselves, and that might be one of the issues that are out there. I was interested because the story there that we just watched, the husband and wife were talking, and he was so frustrated at one point he kind of threw the papers and headed out. And I know that emotions get really high, especially when we're talking about money, but how can we better communicate as husbands and wives when we're talking about it? It'd be very hard for me to lean across the table and say to my husband, I think you're being selfish. Pretty much sure that that's not going to get me anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's some ground rules are helpful. So there's a little acronym, HALT, H-A-L-T. that we shouldn't engage in an important decision, conversation. We just shouldn't engage in a meaningful way if we're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Okay.
When one of those is present, it's a risky deal. If three or more are present, it's a lethal combo.
Well, it's interesting too. As a parent, I remember hearing a little bit about HALT, saying, "All right, you know, you've got children who are upset, or you want to correct the children's behavior," and they said, "Look at HALT." So HALT as an acronym, and I know that we've got a graphic. That is something that we should be putting in place before we ever begin to broach the topics of finances. So you said HALT, and review that for me again. H, if we're hungry, why?
Well, we shouldn't go shopping, for example, if we're hungry,
Okay.
because everything looks good. And going shopping right after your paycheck is the same dilemma. With that money, that's tantamount to hunger. And you think, oh, I can afford that because you have the whole paycheck in your head, forgetting, of course, that that whole paycheck isn't available.
Okay.
Just a portion of it is.
That explains a lot of my problems with the grocery store. Okay, so we'll start with H, hunger. Okay, so if you're feeling hungry, then that's not a time for you to be going out and using money and spending money, right?
Well, we're reacting. Yeah, we're reacting to immediate visceral signals,
Okay.
and that's not long-term thinking. We're just reacting to what we want right at the moment. And anger, of course, if we're angry, we tend to make accusatory statements, as opposed to statements that begin with I. You know, I'm uncomfortable when this occurs, or I wish I could help you see my point of view. Those are enticing ways to start a conversation with a spouse or a child. When we're angry, we don't tend to use I statements.
All right, and that makes sense, but it seems like conversations about finances, especially if they're starting to get out of control, it feels like when you're upset about it is the time that you want to get some relief. That's when you want to address some of these issues. And so you're talking about postponing it, whether it be a half hour, hour, 2 hours, or just when we have a level head.
Well, it's not unlike the 24-hour or 48-hour cooling off period. Before you make a major purchase, think about it for a day or two. And so we're talking maybe not a day or two, but even 10 minutes. And let the intensity of the feeling pass and reflect on, is my perspective the only one at work here? And it never is. And we can say the word never. There are two angles on this issue. And in the heat of the moment, we tend to really hang on to ours because we're defending often ourselves, as opposed to defending a principle. And when we defend our ego, our arguments are always weaker.
And you'll get a lot further in that conversation talking about a principle than talking
Sure.
about just a personal
Absolutely.
bias or thought. Hunger, anger, what was the L again?
Lonely?
So talk to me about that.
Well, there's a lot of bad decisions that could be made in a lonely state, just for immediate relief. And what we want in the moment is often contrary to what we really want in the long run. So lonely that's a tough one because there's a lot of loneliness, and even in households there can be loneliness.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that you're single
Doesn't
or
mean you're
widowed
single.
or widower.
Right.
It means that you're feeling some kind of emotional emptiness.
Right.
And so you're, I guess, vulnerable to making expenditures to try to fill that void?
Well, yeah. There's a lot. I was talking with a driver of a UPS vehicle delivery. He said there are individuals who are just chronic shoppers. He knows because he delivers the stuff.
The packaging, sure.
So he just made an observation that's really intriguing, that it's often those who he knows live alone. They will shop to combat their loneliness.
Interesting. And not even really realize that the little time on their hands, and they
No.
go, now it's so available, isn't it, with online
Pretty
purchasing.
easy, point and click,
Yeah, and away you go. Okay, T.
Tired. Same issue. When we're tired, we want to buy something or obtain something that we would normally, it's too convenient. We're paying for convenience. Normally, if we had more energy, we would just do it. And so if we buy a thing because we're tired, we're paying more for convenience. when we would normally have the energy to do it.
Okay, so we'll keep the word HALT, or the acronym HALT, in our mind before we do any purchases or make any financial plans or decisions, and also before we have those conversations with our spouse. I want to go back to that scene of the tension of the husband and wife as they're talking. And you said if we're angry and emotional, we tend to make accusations rather than talking about principles. So if we, and I'm sure someone watching right now has concerns, the husband or the wife has different spending habits, and they're not happy about that. Your recommendation is, what's the first step?
Set a time to talk. Don't make the conversations simply, don't let them occur in the heat of that spontaneous battle.
Okay.
If there is a set time, Sunday evening, Tuesday evening, when the kids are in bed, or just, a time, a half an hour, and this is our time to talk about finances. And there are ground rules. Number one, other issues can't come in and pollute that conversation.
Okay.
There are other frustrations, they're on the shelf.
That's for next week. Right. Okay.
And the second rule is that civility has to reign. There is absolute civility. There is no reason to raise voice. There is no reason to accuse. Because really, when we think about it, are we teammates or are we opponents? And if we want to be teammates, that's not how we treat a teammate in a hostile way. So I think if the conversations are structured, then it doesn't build up for 3 weeks. We have a systematic way of talking. We have rules of engagement. And it may sound really structured and kind of mechanical, but if things are not going well, let structure help you regain some equilibrium in the way you talk.
Right. Instead of feeling like your things are out of control, you know that on Wednesday night you're going to talk about it, so you have some kind of partial control over that.
Right.
We talked about how we have our phone bank open for people who have questions, and we happen to have Rachel from Orem on the line, and she does have a question about relationships. Rachel, thank you for calling, and welcome to Economic Sense.
Hi, thanks for having me. I have a question. My husband and I, we both really want to talk about our financial problems or financial goals, but we just don't see eye to eye on our goals. We both have different priorities and different ideas about what's important. And so how do we manage that? How do we talk to each other when we both want to talk to each other, but we just have differing views?
Oh, I love that. That to me, at least, and Craig, thank you so much, Rachel, for calling. My first thought, Craig, is isn't it wonderful that both of them want to talk about finances, because that would be the first step. But what do you do when you're talking about two different sets of priorities and goals?
Appreciate the diversity. One set of goals isn't right, and one is wrong. They both have elements of being right. And so if we were to form a corporation, which this young couple has, a family is a corporation. We basically form a corporation with individuals that have different talents. And those different talents will manifest themselves with different opinions. And those are valid. One approach is to write down, try to articulate in writing, because that can take some of the emotion out of the verbal exchange.
Okay.
Try to articulate in writing what your top 4 or 5 goals are, both individuals, independently.
Okay.
And list those down, and then below that, pathways to achieve those objectives. And then come back together and compare the list. And I think in a lot of cases, there's going to be a discovery that what's being expressed as differences are little nuances of how to do it, in the pathways. There's going to be a lot of congruence, in most cases, in the ultimate goals. So you're not really at crossways with each other as far as your major goals. It's just kind of how you might get there.
Okay, I like that. So, that concrete information I'm getting from you is that accept that having different ideas is okay. And set a time to write down those priorities for each of you. Limit it to 4 or 5, whatever it may be. Present them, and then respect each other's goals or priorities, and try to merge those together. You also said it was really important for us to have a structured time, whether it be a weekly meeting we meet. What other suggestions would you have? Because it's so emotional to talk about finances. So we want to make sure we have better relationships with our spouses or family members about this. So what other ideas do you have?
Well, make it tangible. We have had fun, literally fun, with Monopoly money. We sat down with the kids in a little semicircle, and we're both there, Mom and Dad, and we took out a little stack of Monopoly money and said, here's the monthly budget, our income. Now watch this, guys. And we just laid little stacks of money on all of the bill categories, and they were watching this, and they were silent. They were partly horrified. And this occurred, and we said, oh, time out, guys. This is all occurring by the 10th day of the month. And the older kids are saying, so there's 20 days left. We said, right, now you get it. We have this much left for 20 days. And that's an object lesson to help the kids realize, but not just the kids, help us all realize that we have to be careful, and we have more wants than needs. And we sort of gather ourselves and come back to needs. And then after a few months, that the shelf life of that lesson is over. You know, it's expired. We might do it again. But to use play money is to capture the essence of a whole month in a few minutes. It just drives it home, and it makes it more visual and
what a great way.
Pragmatic.
Yeah, great way, because for children who are not used to organizing or managing money, they think it's a never-ending flow until you show them the reality in a safe way with the play money. So I love that. We happen to have another call on the line. His name is Stu from Salt Lake City. Stu, thank you for joining us on Economic Sense. What's your question?
What advice do you have for me on teaching our children how to manage money? My wife and I have different ideas about that.
Okay. So we talked about the play money as one way. What do you think, Craig?
Well, it's hard to learn how to manage if we don't have something to manage. So, and the word manage is maybe not the best word. How about stewardship?
Okay.
So we have to have something to steward over to learn how to do that. So as a suggestion, and differences can arise in terms of parents teaching children in terms of, say, do they have to work during school? That's kind of a decision point. Do they get an allowance? Do they have to buy their own clothes? Those are some common points of potential disagreement. Try different systems and let the children report back if it's kind of helping them in their own assessment. Are they learning what they want to learn about money? We don't ask often enough what our children want to learn about money. We assume that we know that, and I'm speaking for myself. And I think I would have done better had I asked my children, what would you like to learn about money? How can I help you learn that?
Well, and I know that, you know, generations back, it was always taboo to talk about money with family. It absolutely was. You never asked how much dad or mom brought home. You just didn't. But we're in a new time, and information is all available around our kids. And in Stu's question about, you know, different ideas on how to teach children, and you've given us an idea. But when it comes to troubled families, if we have financial problems, what advice do you have, and how we can talk to those kids about it? Or should we?
Well, first off, it strikes me that just talking is the first step. Whether it's about money is irrelevant, but just talking, finding time. Ice cream is a great lubricant for communication. A lot of us go out to dinner really to talk. It's not really about eating, per se. So with a child, I would say start just with more productive discussion that's kind of out of the ordinary.
Okay.
For example...
And you're in a safe, neutral place, too. You know, you're not in the heat of the moment. We're practicing the halt. So you're at an ice cream place, so it's easier to talk about things that might be more serious.
Yeah, I mean, a shocking question to ask our child is, what family customs, what traditions, what practices of this family are you hoping to continue in your family when you have one?
Boy,
that's a sobering question.
You got to be prepared for the answer they might give you.
It's a powerful question, and you'll get some feedback that's really genuine if it's asked in a genuine way. And then if the conversation, if the context is working right, then ask a few questions about how are you doing financially? You know, is your allowance enough, or are you feeling kind of frustrated? If we treat our children as colleagues and co-workers in some regards, not in every case, but asking questions that put them in a position of not just being a delegate, but actually a steward.
And then that engages them in that. Speaking of engagement, we actually have John on the phone right now who's calling in from Cedar City. And you have a question about prenups. Talk to us a little bit about that, John.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
You've been talking so much about family and spouses and so forth.
Sure.
As an individual that has been divorced for a number of years, would I be, I guess you would call it stingy if I required a prenuptial agreement? I've worked so hard all these years, and I have children. When I pass on, I feel as if my children would be entitled to everything that I have acquired through life.
You know what, that's a really thoughtful question, and I appreciate that John also brought up the fact that it's not just families that are dealing with the troubled economy. There's a lot of us, singles and you know, divorce or whatever it may be, trying to make important financial decisions. So what about what John's saying? He wants to safeguard the inheritance for his children.
Well, I don't know that there's a right answer for this. I just have a thought, which is you don't have to wait until you pass on to transfer assets to a child. And frankly, it might be more helpful to them if it's transferred sooner rather than later. So if he's concerned, if the concern is, what if things don't work out and the spouse then takes a lot of what I've earned, and so why not just transfer some of those assets now?
Rather than waiting.
Rather than wait.
In the future. Well,
and that takes care of that problem. And it also helps the kids maybe make a down payment on a house or pay for college or whatever it might be.
And then you're alive to see them enjoy what you were sharing with them.
Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. And the questions have been very helpful as well. Do not forget that our call bank is open tonight at 1-800-298-5298. And we thank Dr. Israelson for joining us, giving us so many important points that we're going to incorporate in our lives. Well, no matter where you are in the state of Utah, there are legitimate organizations to answer your questions and to provide help. Financial specialists are in our studio tonight to take your calls at 1-800-298-5298. For more information and links to reputable Utah resources, you can visit kbyutv.org/economic sense. Or on weekdays during business hours, you can also dial 211 for resource and information. Those 211 representatives will direct you to the places in your community that can help with everything from affordable housing to legal needs, from credit counseling to health care, and much more.
Economic Sense is made possible by contributing viewers of KBYU and by the Utah Housing Coalition, Community Action Services and Food Bank, and Utah State University Extension.